month the next few months and artist talks and stuff, so it's going to be a fun few months ahead. It seems like nobody here has met Mike before, so I'm just going to give you a little background. Mike has self-published 4 novels and written 5 screenplays, 3 of which have been optioned for movies. His work has placed in the Nickel Fellowship, Blue Cat, Final Draft, and Page International Screenplay Competitions. His midlife crisis writing career began when his kids and his money went off to college. Checks made out to Loyola University, Maryland, and Assumption College. He's a graduate of Providence College and Boston College High School, where he was voted most likely to interrupt. He resides in an exclusive gated community in the Snyder Road Estate section of Medfield. He spends his summers on the beaches of Cape Cod and his winters roaming the aisles of Home Depot. Without further ado, Mike.
Wow, what an intro. Thanks. Oh, can we shake hands? Purell. So thanks for the podium. This is what a library looks like on the inside on a Thursday night. Thank you to anyone who's read my books, to anyone who's bought the books. I feel bad because I have a whole bunch of free ones over here that I'm happy to give out. I guess I'm going to tell you guys, hi. I guess I'm going to tell you guys everything I know about writing, about screenplays, about getting a movie made, and about the whole process, which is nothing. I know nothing. I know I can give you no advice. I can only tell you my journey. And that's echoed with everyone I've talked to, from screenwriters to other authors. We don't know, but we do know there's a process, and I can at least tell you my journey of how I started and what I went through to kind of get here. My big night at the library. Mike McQuillan, you missed the whole story. And at the end, the guy dies. So thanks for coming. So a little bit about me and my journey. So about 10 years ago, I had a buddy from high school who wrote a movie. He's a really creative guy. He owns an ad agency. He's done all this great stuff in Hollywood with commercials. So anyway, he wrote a movie, and he had it appear at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York. So a couple of us went down. We took the train down to New York. We went to this beautiful hotel where they had a screening room, leather chairs. There was about 50 people and a screen, and I'm like, okay, this is really cool. And we got to see my buddy, and just as the lights were dimming, he leans over to us and he says, guys, shh, my movie's about to start. And I go, you know what? I want that moment. This is the moment I want, Ned. So he goes, you can do it. You can write a movie. And I'm here to tell you that everybody can write a story. Everybody can tell a story. I don't know if everybody can tell a good story, but everyone has a story in them. So he kind of pushed me to write. So I took a class up in Cambridge, which I would not recommend. It was the Cambridge Center for Adult Education. And all of this is my opinions, by the way. This is just my journey. But going to a class like that, it forced me to write because it was going to meet every week, so you had to have something done. But it was just a group of everybody pushing their own ideas and their own stories, which is great. But you want to tell your own story, and you don't want anyone else to get in there until you're done to criticize it and massage it. So for me, it was a good process. But what I learned was screenwriting. So I did this backwards. Before I published books, I actually made them as screenplays. So a screenplay is a formula. What I learned from the class, and actually I started reading books, and I started reading other screenplays. And I realized what I liked. And that's what I can tell you as a writer. Write what you know and write what you like. So the screenplay just has a formula. It's very process-driven. By page 10, there has to be an inciting incident, which pushes the story forward, and it's really hard. But you need to condense everything into this formulaic process. By page 25, there needs to be a B story. By page 50, there needs to be an all is lost moment. So anyway, you have to massage it into a screenplay. So everything starts with, what I read is, everything starts with an idea. For me, everything started with a scene. So Michelle and I, my wife's here, and we're big movie fans, right? Michelle's here, represent. So for me, everything was a scene. Everything is a scene in a movie, and that's how I get the ideas behind my stories. So my first screenplay was turned into a book called Crossing the Sagamore. And it's a story about high school buddies that come back together. They're best friends in high school. Their friend dies. Now it's 25 years later, and it's just a story about how they reconnect, how their lives change after high school. And when you come back together, it doesn't matter if you're a successful Hollywood guy or a lawyer who lives in Washington, or you're an auto mechanic that stayed back in Dorchester. It doesn't matter how successful you are in society's eyes. When you come back together, you're best friends. So for me, I went out with a friend of mine, and he told me the story about his cousin who had some drug issues. He moved to Cleveland. He passed away from an overdose. His buddies all went out to Cleveland to get his body. And actually, they got the ashes. And they drove his ashes back from Cleveland to Boston. And they stopped at bars all along the way, and they got into trouble, and they got arrested, and a guy actually died on the way back. And so it was all this, and I'm like, okay, this is a story here. So that was my first story. So I wrote Crossing the Sagamore as a screenplay. And my buddy Ned helped me. I took this class, I read these books, and I got it together. And a screenplay has to be like 90 to 110 pages. So when I finished, I was about 150. So you're like, okay, who am I killing off? Who's going to die in Act 2? So anyway, you get it done, and then you put it out there. And so I sent it out, and I went old school. I found a book of Hollywood producers and Hollywood agents, and I emailed them, and Michelle and I would sit in our dining room, and I wrote letters, and I lick envelopes back before the coronavirus, and it was okay to send stuff. And I must have sent 1,000. And what you do is you send what's called a log line and a synopsis. And basically you're taking your heart and soul story and you're breaking it down to one sentence, which is a pitch, which is all of Hollywood buys a pitch. So for Crossing the Sagamore, it was, I should know this, right? It was The Big Chill meets The Hangover, when high school buddies get together for a funeral and they give him the send-off he always wanted. So I send out all these things, and I get a few responses, and boom, I get a producer who likes the idea. So I'm like, okay, wow, I got a screenplay. Signs it, she wants to work on it. And that's when everything, for me, that's when everything started, because the two producers worked with me to do character development. And this is when it all started, but this is when the nightmare began, because it was just breaking this thing down to, well, when they drove to the Cape, who had the keys to the car? Was the door locked when they got to the house? And I'm like, oh my God, who thinks that, why? Why does that matter? Do you go to a movie and raise your hand? And I mean, some people do, and it's frustrating. But I'm like, oh, this is, and it was 4 years of rewrites, 4 years of just beating me up with their opinion. But it taught me the process. And what it taught me, because I don't know what I'm doing. I wrote this story on a whim about a buddy and our friends from high school. But what it did is it taught me to think of character. And every story is about the characters. Okay, they have to be interesting. You have to love them or you have to hate them. But you've got to be engaged right away. In order for you to want to turn that page, you have to be engaged in a screenplay within the first 5 pages. It's like, and what they do is, who are they going to bring this screenplay to that's going to win an Oscar? Who's going to play Kevin? Who's going to play Micheline? Who's going to play Jackie Boy? They want a really compelling character. So what they did was beat me up in building characters. And you need to know everything about them, even beyond the story. I'm like, it's just a goofy road trip story about my friends from high school. Like, it's not that deep. You have to go deep. So in Sagamore, for anyone who hasn't read it, I'm not giving everything away. Guy passes away, And for me, when I go to a movie, my favorite thing is after the movie, going out for a drink and talking about what happened? Like, why did that guy do that? And do you think this was the ending? So when I did Sagamore, the guy passes away, he has a drug overdose. And they asked me, is it a suicide or was it an accident? And I didn't want to tell them because I didn't know. And I want the reader to not know. I want it to be, did he commit suicide on purpose? Or did he die by accident, by a drug overdose? And they beat me up, and it was real. So anyone who's thinking of writing, you have to know your characters. And they would say to me, you need to know the answer to that, whether you tell the reader or not, because you'll know their motivations. Did he want to kill himself? Was it an accident, which is a huge different twist to the story? But what allowed me to do was look at every character as I'm developing it, even little characters. Tertiary characters, ones that are, what's their motivation? What's their conflict? And every character has to have an arc. So they start at the beginning, they learn something, and then they go through a catharsis moment. And a friend of mine, my buddy Ned, who wrote movies, he says you can write movies in the three simple rules of writing a movie. Find your main character, put him in a tree, throw rocks at him, and then get him out of the tree. I'm like, okay, that's you can do that, but it's all about character. What are you going to do to help them change? What are you going to do to help root for them and make them happy at the end? So I wrote Sagamore, signed an option agreement. You know the ending of this story. Did the Hollywood thing. I'm like, okay, this is cool. And while they're off doing their selling and editing, and it's just this nightmare. I mean, Hollywood is just this nightmare. It's 5 years of, it's a cat and mouse. It's financing gets the talent. So if they have money, they can get George Clooney. But if they have George Clooney, they can get money. So that's all their thing, right? So while they went off and did all that, I kept writing. So I did my next book, which was The Crossing Guard. So as I said, all my ideas come from scenes. So the thing about writing is you have to keep writing. You have to, just every day, just keep the story going. When I'm in the middle of a story, these characters keep coming to me and telling me their story and write it down, and I'm always editing, and eventually you just have to put it aside. I'm like, I'm done with this one, go to the next one. So I'm driving up South Street, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and there's a guy running, it's the middle of winter, and he's running up South Street, and he's got a chain wrapped around his waist, and he's got a car tire, dragging behind him, and he's jogging. And I'm like, dude, this is a good scene. I go, I have to put this in a movie. So I kept that in my head. I go, that's a great opening scene. Then my next door neighbor, I live on Snyder Road Estates. Maybe you've seen it. It's a very gated community on the south end of Medfield. Disclaimer, everyone's in my books. Tom Powers is in my books, Katie's in my books, Kim Bletch is in my books, and I have my sister's in, my mom's in my books. Everyone that they go out with me, I say, whatever you tell me may or may not end up, so you may want to be careful. So my next door neighbor, Don Hayes, he's 85 now. When I first moved in, he was about 65. And every day he's out mowing his lawn, and he's wearing a United States Marine Corps t-shirt. So I go out to introduce myself. I'm Mike Bernard, I just moved in. How are you? Don Hayes. So I said, oh, I see your t-shirt. Did you used to be a Marine? Well, he turns red, and I think he's going to knock me out. You didn't used to be a Marine. He is a Marine. Even to this day, 85, he is a Marine. So I'm like, ooh, okay. Did you ever pull a tire down South Street? And he was part of a running club. So Don Hayes, and across the street from Don is my other neighbor, Amanda Carnes. So Amanda is a really interesting person. She worked at the Paul Newman Hole in the Wall camp with kids with cancer. She became a hospice nurse, and now she works at the oncology unit of Children's Hospital. So I'm like, okay, this is just too good. There's so much interest here. So I pull them aside, I interview them both. Don actually connected me with one of the guys in his platoon who was a Marine up in Maine who fought under Chesty Puller, who was the most highly decorated Marine in all of history, and he fought in the Chosin Reservoir in Korea. So I pulled all this stuff together, and I go, Don, you are now Amanda's father, and you're gonna live together in Southie, okay? You're gonna be a Marine who never thinks he's gonna die, and Amanda's gonna be a hospice nurse who helps people cross over. And they're like, okay, cool, when can I get my movie? Great. So I wrote that. And to go back to the point, it's all about characters. Like, those are really interesting characters. They're intriguing. So, got that screenplay out to Hollywood. And the thing is, it's got to be validated. You can just send screenplays, you can send stories, but I put them in contests, and they started winning, and they started getting recognition, and I started getting feedback from professional. And so it validated it. I mean, I thought they were good. My wife thought they were good. Katie thought they were good. My neighbors thought, but I'm like, yeah, that doesn't matter. I got to get it out there real. So this one got picked up. So this one, the crossing guard, got me my first Hollywood meeting. So I'm like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. You know, I'm going to Hollywood. So this one got picked up by a director by the name of Cayman Grant, who, when I met her, she had just won an Emmy for her documentary on ESPN. She's phenomenal. She's just a powerhouse. They say out there they're great in a room. You can just tell that she's really cool. And so I go out there with Michelle, and I go out to California. I'm all dressed up. I got my shirt from Marshall's. I'm feeling pretty cool, right? We go out for coffee, and I'm like, you know, we're meeting for coffee at 9. I get there at 8. I'm like, you know, surrounding the place. Where do I sit? What do I do? Get there, sit with her. She's phenomenal. She's great. And I'm sitting there, and I've got my screenplay, and I think I'm really cool. Like, if you ever want to look cool, like, have a screenplay in your hand, you know? And so we're sitting there, and she's phenomenal. She's represented by CAA, so she has access to all these actors. And she's saying, you know, I can bring this to Clint Eastwood, but he's going to want to direct it. I could probably bring it to De Niro. And I'm like, yeah, bring it to De Niro. Yeah, that would be cool. So we're doing this. And I'm like looking around. So she gets up and goes to the bathroom. And I'm like, if this were the blue moon right now, I would be the coolest guy. So I look around, the waiter comes over. I just thought this was funny. So the waiter comes over, and I'm like, did you hear any of that, by the way? And he goes, yeah. And it was just so off the guy. He's like, yeah. And I look around, and literally everyone at a table has a screenplay. They're all pitching their story. And I'm like, okay, I get it. She was great. And once again, she's gonna own it. She didn't beat it up, but she's gonna make it better. So then it was another 2-3 years of her getting involved in the story, rewriting the story. I had to go to Dawn, and I had to go to Amanda, who's the hospice nurse. I go, Amanda, you're gonna have a bit of a drinking problem in this story. I'm giving you the heads up. Yeah. But what I come to realize is you have to give, there's a writer that says you have to kill all your darlings. You just gotta let them go. And I have to trust that they're gonna do my stories right. And I don't have any juice. Like, I can't go, I'm Mike Bernard from Medfield, you can't make it that way. I'm like, hey man, make it. If I can sit in a theater and the lights come down and I can go quiet, my movie's starting, that's all I want. If I can speak in a Medfield library, I'm like, cool. So she's got it. I'm optimistic she'll make it. But I gotta keep writing, because I'm like, you gotta be done. I drive myself crazy. Just, it's over. Jackie Boy Hayes is running with a tire. That's done. So I moved on, and then I wrote. I've only got 4. So I moved on, and I wrote my 4th. And I wanted to be different. A theme with all of my stories is I do try to write really strong women. I live with 3 strong women, there's a couple of themes. I love, like, strong, tough women. I went to school at BC High in Dorchester. Crossing Guard is based in Southie. Crossing the Sagamore is based in Dorchester. I like tough Irish women, like Michelle Murphy. They don't take shit. They're like, but they're wounded, and there's something there, right? So, Exactly, right? You're my muse, honey. You're my muse. Honey, you get to pick the casting, so it'd be nice to me. I get to pick who's going to play you. Could be Melissa McCarthy. So I wanted to write stronger characters, and I wanted to be a little bit different because these were both like tough Irish girls, you know, in a tough environment. Fisherman's View is in Brooklyn. It's another tough Irish story. So anyway, so my third one, I'm like, I got to get lighter here. So I wrote a young adult novel. And anyone who's been in Medfield, I had this story. Every Friday night, we spent our Fridays at Blockbuster, up by next to Blue Moon, which is J3. When the kids were little, it was a Friday night Blockbuster thing. So I found this funny little story. I saw this documentary about, there's two documentaries. One was called Life Animated, which was about a kid in Belmont who was a child with autism who had regressive autism, so he stopped talking when he was 4 years old, didn't start speaking again until he was 8. And the parents couldn't communicate with him until one day they had a Disney movie on, and he came to life, and he started speaking through the characters. So I saw that documentary, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. It's not a tire being pulled down South Street, but it's pretty cool. And then I saw another documentary which was about a family in Manhattan, a family in the Bronx. 4 kids brought up, it was called the Wolf Pack. And a father wouldn't let his kids leave the apartment because he was fearful of the world. 9/11 had happened and all these terrorist things were happening. So they had to build their own world in their apartment, and they would watch videos and they would recreate scenes. So finally, when they're 18, one of them was emancipated and he got out, and his whole world was movies. So Katie helped me write a young adult novel, which was kind of it's a throwback to the 80s movies that I grew up with. It's a big tribute to John Hughes movies like Pretty in Pink and The Breakfast Club, and I took those documentaries and I made it about a child who was brought up in his parents' video store, and the mother leaves, and the father doesn't let him, he's homeschooled, the father doesn't let him leave the house, and he's schooled on videos. So instead of math, they watched Good Will Hunting. Instead of biology, they watched The March of the Penguins. Instead of history, they watched Mel Brooks' History of the World. So suddenly his dad has a breakdown, and he's alone. He's a fish out of water, and he has to get put into a modern high school. And all he knows are films from the 80s. So it was a great hook. I think it's a really nice story. This one got a lot of attention. So this one got, so I just think the Hollywood stories are kind of funny stories. So this one got me my big Hollywood meeting. So we go out, and I get Tom Cruise's producing partner. Now, at this point, remember, I'm Mike from Medfield. I'm like writing little stories. It's no big deal. But I've already signed 2 option agreements. So I'm kind of a big deal. I'm thinking, you know, and so we go out, we're staying there, and this guy reaches out to me. He goes, I read your story. I love it. Would love to make it. I'm like, yeah, I've heard all that before. And so I go, I got my Marshall shirt on, I got my jeans. Michelle's like, you need to dress up. I'm like, it's not a big deal. I've been through this before. I go to this building, and it's called the Soho West House. And I have no idea what this is. And I mentioned it to someone, they're like, you're going there? Anyway, there's 3 of them in the world. One's in London, one's in New York, one's in there. So I go to this thing, and the reason I'm telling you this is, I'm so over my head, okay? That if I can do this, if anyone has a writing gene, if anyone's interested, these things can happen. I just started writing 8 years ago, right, in my late 40s, when the kids were all gone out of the house. So here I am, so I'm going to the, so I'm fine. I've got 2 options, not a big deal. So I go into this building is just agents and managers from Hollywood. That's the whole building is that. So it's no big deal. It just looks like a regular office building. So I walk in. There's a separate elevator for the penthouse. I'm like, okay, the penthouse. Maybe I shouldn't have worn my Marshall shirt. This could be big. So I go in. It's 10 o'clock on 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. And now I walk into this area where there's just one elevator. And there's a woman there. And I love you. This woman was beautiful, okay? 10 in the morning. It's like a model. I walk in, she says, Mr. Bernard, oh, we've been expecting you. Now I'm really nervous. Now I'm like, okay, now I'm way over my head. Go up, there's there's just one button. It takes you right to the top. You're at the penthouse. It overlooks all of LA. And so I grab my phone, and I'm just like taking all these, okay? I'm like, everybody, look. I FaceTime Kate. I'm like, look at me. I'm in the thing. Go up. The guy's name was Michael Doven, D-O-V-E-N. Comes down, meets me. Luckily, I had the phone put away by then. So he comes in, oh, Mike, have you been here before? I'm like, no, this is my first time to the Soho West. And he said, we have a couple of rules. We have a couple of rules here. No cell phones and no pictures. So I'm like, okay, like now, like starting now, you mean? So from now I don't take pictures because I've taken a ton of pictures in a year. The guy couldn't have been nicer. It was great. He loved it. It's the same old story. Love it. This is what I learned. And my friend Ned, who subsequently made another movie, Hollywood is the land of the soft yes, which is we love you. What I learned is no one wants to say no. They don't want to be the person that turned down Raiders of the Lost Ark, or Jaws. You're the guy that said no to crossing the Sagamore? Are you crazy? So they also want to have books and stories in their stable so that when they're out and someone says, I need a road trip story about a bunch of buddies from high school, anybody got one? Boom. The production companies all want, have you got a story about a Marine Corps veteran who lives with his hospice nurse daughter? Got it, perfect. Do you have one about guy in the... So it's all the soft yes. And all I got to do is keep dreaming. This is one of them's going to get made. My best shot is Crossing Guards. So I got to keep writing. So I wrote Fisherman's View. So I guess this was my first book. I finally got sick of the whole screenplay game, okay? Even though I liked going to Hollywood and it was really fun, I just didn't have the clothes to really step my game up. So I wrote Fisherman's View, and it's all about scenes, right? It's all about scenes in my head. So I know this is on cable, so Lindsay might watch this. So sorry, Linz. My daughter, Lindsay. So Lindsay suffered from anxiety. She would have panic attacks. So she's in Philadelphia. She lives in Baltimore, but she's in Philadelphia at the time. And we are out on Long Island for a Thanksgiving dinner. So Lindsay's supposed to drive from Philadelphia over to Long Island. So we get a phone call, and it's Lindsay. And she's like, what's up, Lindsay? She breathes, I can't do it, Dad. She's like, I can't drive over the bridge. Has anyone seen the Verrazano Bridge? Verrazano Bridge links Brooklyn to Staten Island. It's huge. So she's like, I can't, she's crying. I can't do it, I can't drive. I go, I'll be right there. So me and Lindsay's boyfriend get in the car. We drive from Long Island over the Verrazano. It's a big bridge. And we get to the other side, and she's on, is it Staten Island? It'll be Staten Island on the other side. And so I get there, and she's lying on the ground, and she's sort of meditating, and it's beautiful blue sky. Actually, I'll read you the piece. It's kind of cool. And she's like, Dad, I couldn't do it. So I lie down next to her. She's like, Dad, it looks like a dinosaur from down here. I go, yeah, it looks like a dinosaur. But it's going to be a great scene in a movie, Linz. I'm like, this is going to be a great scene in a movie. So I wrote Fisherman's View with that kind of impetus in my mind, which is, again, characters. It's a story about three kids, about their passive-aggressive mother, not my mother, but another mother, who passes away, and there's a death theme here I think you're getting. Anyway, the father comes back, and he's got 3 bags of her ashes, red, yellow, green. And he gives each of the kids a bag of her ashes. And the red is for Teresa, who's the angry one. The green is for Richard, who's very materialistic, and he's a big fashion designer in Manhattan. And the yellow is for Fiona, AKA Lindsay, who's, suffers with anxiety and panic attacks. And the mother leaves them directions. Here's what I want you to do with my ashes. And they think that's what they stand for. I'm the angry one, I'm materialistic, I'm the panic attack weak one. And it's a totally different story. It's a totally different reason. The journey to get rid of the ashes has just begun. And it's really a story about how you're brought up in the same house with your brothers and sisters, and you can be so different without even knowing it. But then at your core, you're family. So anyway, I wrote that. Screenplay was great. Oh, love you, and all that. And so one of the producers is like, you know what, you should make this a book. So that's what started me, the whole book writing process. Because up till this point, it was all screenplays. In screenplays, I don't want to say they're easy, but they're easier, for me anyway. I know you write and you write. Screenplays, as I said, it's a formula. It's about 110 pages is the most. Anything beyond that, they're not going to read. But it's very dialogue driven. The dialogue has to tell the story. So producers, they're not going to read. They're going to skim through it, and they want the dialogue to capture the character. So that, like I said, so they can go to an actor and say, you're going to read this. There's a scene in this. You're going to crush it. You're going to get an Oscar. So they come to me, and they go, you should make this a book. Fisherman's View, there's enough there that you can make this a novel. And I'm like, oh, that's going to be so hard because I have zero attention span. Let me give you an example. I can do this. I can sum this up very easily. Here's the difference between, for me, here's the difference between writing a novel. This is the glasses part here, man. You know, this makes me look cool. So here's the difference between writing a novel and writing a screenplay. Let me find it. So this is Crossing Sagamore. It's based in Southie. It's about a hospice nurse. She goes to visit her patients. She's got all these patients that she takes care of. One is this older woman named Mrs. Wallace, who lives in Quincy, which is an homage to you guys. So this is whatever, chapter whatever, Quincy, Mass. All right. The Wallace House is a charming, well-kept saltbox colonial in the Wollaston Beach section of Quincy, just south of Boston. The house is large and inviting, handsomely landscaped with trim bushes, now covered by green plywood and brown burlap to protect them from the harsh South Shore winters. It's a neighborhood where the homes are old and stately, and the air is clean and full of the nearby sea. There's a kind of mellowness and memory of another time and another America. Megan walks along the sidewalk and up the short asphalt driveway. She turns the lock and enters a home that's immaculate but dated. Since she comes and goes at all hours, most of the families in her care will give her a spare key. The furnishings look brand new, as if they were just brought home from Jordan Marsh in 1978. Mrs. Wallace is a woman who appreciates the daily graciousness of life. So the Waterford crystal and china teacups are always set, waiting for someone, anyone, to pay the lonely woman a visit. Megan walks up the oriental carpeted stairs to Mrs. Wallace's bedroom, draping her coat and hat on an embroidered wingback chair sitting by the door. The bedside stand is covered with pill bottles and a gallery of family pictures. Megan picks up a simple brushed silver frame that has been knocked down. The strong, handsome man in a 1940s black and white photo stares back at her from behind the glass. She dutifully stands the frame back up in its rightful place along the others. "Good morning, sunshine," Megan cheerily greets her patient. That's a book. Let me tell you a screenplay. Interior Hayes bedroom, day. "Good morning, sunshine," says Megan. That's the difference, okay? That's the difference. This is pain, this is happiness. Writing the book, it sort of frees you up, right? I did enjoy it because here's the bottom line. I had these stories, whether they get made into movies or not, I don't know. But until they do, I want to get the stories out there. So when I wrote Fisherman's View as the first book, it was really well received. It was awesome for me, and I thank you, everyone, for reading it. And my mom read it. My mother's never going to read a screenplay. Reading a screenplay is very difficult. It's very staccato. It's character line, and then it's what they call a slug line, which is defining the bedroom, right? And just giving direction. So it's hard to read a screenplay. But my mom can read. So my mom read the books, and my friends read the books. And so when I started writing, it sort of freed me up. For me, because I did it differently than the authors here, the screenplay was a really nice skeleton. It gave me the framework of the beginning, the middle, and the end. There's 3 acts in this play. So I knew where the story was, and I knew where the story was going. What the book allowed me to do was meander in and out. Now, these are fun little stories. Most people say they can read them in a day, which is good, right? Read them in a day. They're so engrossing, you can't put them down. But it was like, when I did it, I'm like, okay, I just had to get it to like 200. I figured if I could get it to 200 pages, right? I came in here one day, and all the local author books are over there. And I'm looking, I'm like, I can do this. I picked up some of them. I'm like, you know what? I can do this. And I said in my mind, if I can get it to like 225, I think that's reasonable to ask $11 on Amazon. If I can get it to 225. So, wide margins, a lot of spaces, a lot of pictures. We'll get there. And the hard thing, and I know there's a couple of people that have written books here, it's really hard. Like for me, it was really hard. Sometimes it flows out of you. Sometimes I'm like to Michelle and Kate, I'm like, don't come in the room. I'm deep in this story. Other times I'm just wandering, or I'll write for an hour and I'll go back, I'm like, that's awful. That's just awful. But I knew if I could get it to 200 pages, I had something. And what the book allowed me to do was create the descriptions of Mrs. Wallace's room, which was nice. But for me, I'm like, I remember, I'm not a great reader. Like when I would read these, when I was doing books, I would read books similar to the book. So I read Dorchester books, I read Southie books, I read Marine Corps books. I'm like, I remember when I read Field of Dreams, about the baseball in Iowa, I'm like, I'm on page 20, they're still talking about the corn. I'm like, just get to the game. So for me, it was really hard because I've been taught as a screenwriter to just get to the point, right? Just get the dialogue. Boom, 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 you're cutting stuff out. With a book, I had to add stuff in. So it was like, Jimmy walks into the bar and it smelled of mahogany. It reminded him of that time when he was in Little League when his father didn't pick him up. I'm like, oh my God, okay, I can do this. But I wanted to make it not painful for the reader, because sometimes you read and they go back. Like, I could have gone back and forth, and I'm just not that, I'm not talented enough to do that, but I wanted to move the story forward. I knew where it was going, and I knew that I could add value to the scene and to the character, and I just wanted to I didn't want it to just end, but every page has to be meaningful. I learned that in the screenplay. You want to know, every chapter should try to end with a bit of a hook, like, oh, okay, what happened? Maybe I will finish this book. Maybe I won't return this to the library on time. That's my dream. So for me, I started writing, I got the books out, so I did Fisherman's View, then a crossing guard, and then I did coming attractions for the young adult audience. And I can just get the stories out there. Crossing guards about a Marine Corps veteran. It's been so cool. Anytime I have this little, Michelle helps me, anytime I'm out and we see a license plate with a Marine Corps banner on the back, I leave the book for him. It's got to General Dunford's desk, General Dunford was the top Marine general who just left the office, but he's from Southie, and he went to BC High. And this got to him, and so it's just been really, and so I did a book sign, and these things are great. Like I get to do library talks, and it's cool, right? So if everything's downhill everything is literally downhill from this point on for my career. I did a book signing down the Cape a couple summers ago, and so I'm standing there, and it was really fun. It's a Fisherman's View is kind of a fun story, so it's got this Cape Cod feel. And so these two elderly women come walking up to the table on the sidewalk. It was in Chatham. And they're like, are you Mike Bernard? I'm like, yeah, my name's right there. It says Mike Bernard. It's Miss Callahan and Miss Doherty, my second and third grade teachers, okay? And I'm like, oh my God. She goes, your mother called and told me that you wrote a book. This is a true story. I have pictures. If you ever want to feel pressure, have your second and third grade teachers read your writing. She pulls me at Miss Doherty, still Miss Doherty pulls me aside, Michael, on page 17, there's a typo. I didn't teach you that. You have terrible handwriting. I'm like, take it easy, Miss Doherty. She's going to die by the 7th page, right? So I put her in my next book. So then finally, I have them out. It's just been great. It's just, you know, I didn't do it to sell books. I self-published. That was on purpose. I didn't want to do the publishing route. Quite frankly, I'd had enough rejection with my screenplays. I mean, just trying to get them out there, and it's just rejection after rejection. The soft yes, we love it. And my goal is to get movies, so I'm already there, right? They've already signed options, so I kind of did it backwards. So I didn't do the publishing route. I went through Amazon, which anybody can. They put you through a process, and I just wanted to get the books out there. I just wanted to get them out to an audience. And if you like them, great. If you don't tell me. I don't know. But actually, that is a good point. If you're writing, have people read them that you know are going to be mean. That's the best advice I can give you. Give them to your harshest critic. Give them to someone who's going to rip them apart, because you kind of know the good stuff. You kind of know what's funny. You know, oh, yeah, that's a funny scene. I'm like, yeah, that was a funny scene. The guy pulled the tire. But you want someone to rip it apart. Like Crossing Guard was about a nurse, and Claire McCabe, who's a neighbor, kind of ripped it up, she ripped it apart. She's like, nurses wouldn't do that. And I made her a tough nurse, right? So Claire was like, we're not that mean. We would never drink on duty. And she was great though, because I didn't know, you know, the nursing side of it. I knew the compassionate side and what I thought I'd write in the story. But beyond kind of research, get someone to beat your story up. I mean, just really go, I don't get it. Why would they do that? And you can agree with it or not, but you need a 360 view, right, of your whole stories. So my last thing that I did want to leave you with, which for me was really special, and I really do appreciate everybody who's read it. It's really cool. It's been really fun for me, especially later in life, because for me, with my kids, it's been really fun. They're like, Dad, you're writing, you're putting your Marshall shirt on, and you're going to Hollywood? I'm like, yeah, you can do anything. You can do anything whenever you want. Just put your mind to it and sit down. This isn't a motivational speech. But what's been cool for me, so when I wrote Crossing the Sagamore, that was my first story. And I wrote it about my friends. And so when I finally, you know, when I'd already been beat up from Hollywood, and you know, maybe they're going to make the movie, maybe they won't. So I finally said, you know what, forget it. I'm going to write my own story. I'm going to write Crossing the Sagamore. I'm going to put all my friends in it. There's a disclaimer that the characters are based, you know, I've got a legal team that they're not, but I put their names in it as Kim Bletcher is a cool, badass detective. Tom Powers is a cop from Dorchester. But I wanted it for me, and I didn't care. The shackles were off for all these years that I wrote screenplays. And they're like, well, what's the protagonist's journey in chapter 7? I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to write this the way I want to write this. This is going to be I told it in the first person, as if it happened to me, and I wrote it for my friends. And so, actually last week, so it's dedicated to my friends from high school, from 1981. And literally a half an hour ago, I dedicated it to a classmate who passed away. It's dedicated to my class, dedicated to BC High, class of 81, Forever Friends. And it's also for John Cruz and Joe Sabika, Forever Young, two of my classmates that passed away right after high school. John Cruz's sister got the book yesterday and emailed me about a half an hour ago. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And it was a beautiful email. It was and that's why I did it. That's why I do it. And you know, it was for those moments. So I want to leave. I do want to just read this one, which I think is for me was a very special passage. And this is so it's a story of my high school friends. It's a story about old friends that there's something about the friendships that you have, and doesn't matter where you go in life. When you come back together, there's just this bond. And we graduated in 1981, and it was all about music. It was all about 8-track tapes and, you know, road trips to Cape Cod. So I wrote this for them and for John Cruz. So, did you get me water, Katie? And the green M&Ms. I'm a star. So, and this was the first book I wrote. All the other ones are written, this was written in the first person, as if I were on the trip, which was kind of hard to do because I was the narrator. But anyway, this is Crossing the Sagamore with a picture of 8-track tapes, which was from my front seat of my Bonneville. When I think back on that year, our senior year of high school, it seems like I could measure it out in blocks of music, like Kevin's rows of cassettes. There was rock in the summer as we prepared for the football season, listening to the Rolling Stones, Blue Oyster Cult, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. There were dance tunes in the winter at house parties with Barry White and the Earth, Wind and Fire. And there was the indie punk springtime when we all thought we were cool, listening to Devo, the English Beat, and the Sex Pistols. I know when I decided to write this story, it was crazy. I mean, who the hell would believe a bunch of grown men would drive their dead friend hundreds of miles home? But we did. Believe it or not, we did. And I'd like to think Jimmy loved every minute of it. I've written self-help books, so this is just another one, right? It's a story about friendship, and I don't care if anyone buys it or even reads it. It's mine, like that sunrise in Cleveland. This story belongs to us, me, Joe, Beef, Kevin, and Jimmy, my best friends. Everyone needs people like them in your life, people you can just be yourself with, say shit, act like an asshole, bust balls, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a Washington lawyer or a car mechanic or you own a deli or you're a big phony Hollywood celebrity. You know each other, maybe better now than when we were young. Kevin's the angry one, Jimmy's the lost one, Beef's the child, Joe's the clown, and me, well, I guess I'm the idiot. They say the best time machine is a song. There's something special and magical about music, how it evokes a memory and causes emotions to rush over you. There are people with Alzheimer's and dementia, people who can't even recognize their wives or their husbands or children, but suddenly a song comes on and their face lights up, and they know every word to Hey Jude by the Beatles or Beyond the Sea by Bobby Darin. It's subconscious and sublime and as deep as the ocean. And it's like that with old friends. When you're together, there's a feeling of joy and comfort that you just don't have with other people. Time and experience take you away, but when you get back together, thick memories brush by like they just happened yesterday. And you remember little details, like what you were wearing and how hard you laughed and the song that was playing, the music, it's always the music. And you have this total, absolute feeling of happiness and love, real love, the kind you know deep in your soul. Thanks. Woo. 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 Let's see them make a movie out of that. So, any questions? There's free books. Tom Powers is here. He's in the book. So thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming up. This is what a library looks like on a Thursday night, people. Enjoy. And I do have, if anybody wants a copy of any of them, they're over there. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.